You're welcome back. You're still watching the Arise News coverage of the off-cycle governorship election in Imo, Kogi and Bayelsa states. With me, Ngozi Alebu. Let's bring you some updates. We'll take a look at Bayelsa State, where we did earlier. Former governor of the state and former minister of state for petroleum resources, Epelle Silva, voted alongside his wife in Opoama Ward 4, Unit 4 in Nembe Bras Council area of Bayelsa State.
We have some issues in the ward. Unit 3, Unit 5, and Unit 9 had issues. I think the registers were not uploaded, so we escalated it to INEC. And of course, they accepted that it was a careless mistake on their part. I don't know why units in my ward were not uploaded, but I think the problem is being rectified, and they've promised that in those particular units they will extend the voting time because a lot of people would have been disenfranchised if that was not rectified. But we've been able to escalate it to Abuja. But so far, I mean, in my unit, things are going on very well. And around the state, we also are following, and there is a lot of violence. I mean, PDP is doing quite a bit there, trying to molest our voters with security. In fact, in some cases, it is believed by our people that we are running election not against PDP but against security. But we are containing the situation, and I'm sure that at the end of the day we'll come out victorious.
Would you mind stating these areas specifically?
Yes, in fact I was told that in Yenagoa especially there has been a lot of violence, a lot of police action. In fact, this morning I woke up with a story of one of my APC members shot, and of course there are pictures. So these are not made up stories. And by afternoon, we had situations where the army, especially in Bayelsa State, has taken over some areas. In fact, in Biseni, I've just spoken to them. They say it's the army that is out there with the PDP to snatch ballot boxes and so on. I don't know the extent of what is going on. But frankly speaking, the security in Bayelsa State must be called to order. They are really playing on the side of the PDP, unfortunately, especially the army is playing on the side of the PDP.
Governorship candidate of the APC there, Epelle Silva, with allegations of complicity on the part of the security forces there in Bayelsa. Well, still staying with Bayelsa State, Governor Diri wants the Independent National Electoral Commission to address the allegation that the supporters and agents of the PDP are being prevented from taking part in the process by suspected political thugs in Nembe Council area. Well, Governor Diri said this after voting in at Sampu community in Kolokuma-Opokuma Council area. The governor, who described the electoral process in the area as seamless and largely peaceful, expressed optimism that the exercise will be generally fair across the state.
It's an improvement on all the other elections that I've participated on, and very seamless, very fast. It's too early to call. We are still putting our ears to the ground as to what is happening in other polling units. For concerns, yes, we have concerns about Nembe Basambri, where party members, most of whom have been excluded, our agents have been stopped from going into Nembe, and so that's a very serious concern. Our party has written an official letter to the chairman of INEC, and INEC has to take drastic actions to ensure that our people are allowed to go in there to vote.
What I see everywhere is peaceful, it's actually going accordingly. Everything is in order to the glory of God. We pray that the rightful person that God has ordained should come out victorious.
This is one Bayelsa State whosoever that emerge in the winner is still a Bayelsa, and he has to call on the losers to himself and then embrace peace, then take Bayelsa as one.
So I made my card at this sample here. So when I woke up this morning, I looked for everywhere. I didn't see my units.
They created more units in sample ward 6, thereby moving those in the overflow to these new units. So many people are finding it difficult to locate where they have been moved to. So we advise her to be patient, go back and search those overflow units.
All right, let's cross live now to Cairo and speak with Jake Epelle, the founder of TAF Africa, where he's been coordinating the election team via the TAF Africa election hub. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Mr. Jake Epelle, all the way in Cairo there. Of course, you've been keeping more than an eye on goings-on in the 3 states, Kogi, Bayelsa, and of course, Imo State. Let's get your assessment so far based on the reports you've been getting. How inclusive would you say that this process has been so far, especially for persons living with disabilities?
I think we've not done badly. We're not absolutely disappointed. The reports that I'm getting from the election hub, from the deployment of 90 observers across the 3 states that we're having off-cycle elections, the reports are a bit heartwarming. The unfortunate incidents that we have received, especially the issue of voter apathy from Imo State, is of huge concern to us at TAF Africa. And it's expected, taking into consideration the very undemocratic tendencies and attitude of Governor Hope Uzodinma and his administration. You know, I blame him squarely for the voter apathy that has happened in Imo State, and it's very shameful and very undemocratic that some of the threats and some of the insecurity created by some of the undemocratic decision which he took have resulted into what we're seeing today playing out in Imo State. But generally,
right,
we will see
Mr. Epelle, yeah, let me, sorry to butt in here. I mean, you just made a very serious point there about the conduct or handling, you know, by Hope Uzodinma, the governor of Imo State. You seem to put all the blame at his doorstep. Why exactly?
Well, because of some of the decisions that he took prior to this election. Because you don't forget, I am strictly apolitical. If he had done well, I would say he has done well. But there were some very, very unpleasant and a bit irresponsible decision. I mean, take for instance, asking all the hotels in Imo State to shut out visitors and government going to pay for all the rooms. It's tactical and strategically, undertaken by no other than his administration, because we have letters that was signed by his officers, those in his government, asking the hotels to submit their bills so that they will pay them, so that civil society and election observers will not come into where are paid ahead of that letter.
Mr. Jake Epelle, I mean, it must be stressed, and I'm not a spokesperson for the Imo State Governor, Hope Uzodinma, for that matter. The Imo State government actually disowned that particular letter, saying, I mean, distance itself from it, saying it's nothing but fake news, and that everyone was allowed to, do whatever they needed to do in furtherance of the election. Just needed to put that out there. But let's talk more.
No, that's not the only thing. There were rhetorics. There were rhetorics by some of his cronies. There were issues. Don't forget, like I said, I'm strictly apolitical. I don't belong to any political party and will never belong to any political party. So I'm here in the interest of the government, of the people, the citizens of this country, and all of us who are fighting for true democracy, But he's not the only one. We got a similar threats from Kogi State also, and unfortunately, both of them are members of the same political parties. It's this show of shame must not continue. We're trying to manage the lack of confidence and fear and intimidation that voters were struggling with based on the past election. And hopefully, we were pushing for citizens to come out and vote. Unfortunately, incidents like this creates voter apathy, which is not good for our democracy, which is supposed to be thriving.
Specifically for persons living with disabilities, how, if you've been able to make your assessment so far, how has the specter of violence and insecurity affected the turnout of persons living with disabilities in the 3 states?
Thank you, Ngozi. You see, I'm weighing in on this because we feel the pinch. There's a saying that when 2 elephants are fighting, it's the grass that suffers, because any act of violence, any state of insecurity in electoral process affects the most vulnerable, because we're the ones without eyes that can't see in order to run to safety. We're the ones without legs that can run, we are the ones without hands. We're the ones that can hear, so whenever there is this level of insecurity around any electoral process, that affects the most vulnerable. So fortunately, I think we've done better in terms of participation. We've done better in terms of accessibility. Over 97% from the 3 states put in aggregation. We had access to priority voting. And of course, deployment of some of the assistive material. We still have the problem of INEC official not knowing how to either use the resources or administer the resources to the people who needs it. But I think compared to what we have in the previous election, disability inclusion in the electoral process gave us something to rejoice, but it can definitely be better.
It's quite heartening to hear that. In terms of deployment of assistive tools, I'd like you to stay on that a little. And of course, you do say it can get better. How can INEC get it right, or the handlers of the process, whether the security level and what have you? How can it get better, next time around? What are the specific things, briefly?
And the problem is always at the point of deployment. I have been taking INEC chairman to task, asking simple question: what happens between what all of us agree to do, what all of us see that INEC has acquired, between that and the deployment and demonstration of these resources? In other words, what happens at the point where these resources will be required by those who will require it, persons with disability? There's always a disconnect That's the point I'm trying to make. There's always a disconnect between what INEC has done, what INEC has deployed, and the usage of the materials. That means the people that are meant to administer the resources are probably ignorant of the availability of the resources. So we found a situation where you see some of the magnifying glasses and posters and things in what we refer to as Ghana Must Go, which is the big bag, that these electoral officers uses. In other words, they don't know that those things are there, or they just don't know how to use it, or they get carried away when there is a surge. When other voters without disability are coming into the polling station and they don't have time to actually focus on persons with disability. There's always a disconnect between what happens on the election day and what INEC had prepared for. In terms of preparation, I always score INEC over and above 90%. In terms of acquisition of the materials, I score INEC over and above 90%. But the problem where the rubber meets the road is either at the point of deployment, which I have always called on INEC chairman to declare inclusivity resources for the election as sensitive materials. If it's declared as sensitive material, then attention will be given to it in terms of deployment. So it's either the problem with deployment, which I don't see that very much, and the people who are administering the resources to the people who needs it. There's also some level of responsibility on our own part, our community. There are also our community members who are not aware of these resources. So when they get to the polling unit, they don't ask for it. So there is all kinds of issues that we're dealing with. We're collecting all this information and we will enshrine them in our reports.
And that's great to know. That's so great to know. Mr. Epelle, let me put you on hold. I'll take you to Ayetoro in Kogi State, where Arise correspondent Mary Chinda is on standby to give us an update on the governorship elections there in Kogi. Mary, good to see you. It's been a long day, no doubt. A lot of news been coming out from the Ayetoro and Ayetoro Gbede in Kogi State there. Maybe you want to shed more light on what's been happening there so far.
Oh yes, quite a number of stories coming out from there, but thankfully there are no stories of violence and that end, especially across the polling units that Arise TV visited the whole day. It would suffice to say that there was a heavy presence of security men or military men and also paramilitary personnel all across the Kogi West area of Kogi State. However, what was of major concern to election observers was the issue of low voter turnout. Right, while the people seemed, the people who showed up were in a high spirit to vote. Matter of fact, as at about 10:30, 11 a.m. today at the Okekoko ward in Kaba area, which is a Kababuni area, which is the headquarters of Kogi West, we found an 86-year-old woman being aided by her 55-year-old son, all in a bid to get accredited and of course cast her vote. That was how excited the people who turned out to vote were, but there was low voter turnout, and this seemed to be a little bit worrisome for a couple of election observers. Now INEC is getting some kind of kudos and of course thumbs up at this time because INEC delivered, in some of the areas that we visited, as they had promised to. As early as between 7 to 8 a.m., materials, voting materials had actually, both sensitive and non-sensitive materials, had actually been delivered in most of the polling units that we monitored. And then voting had actually started off in earnest as at 8:30. So, and of course, we could find the use of the beavers for accreditation and, of course, the voting process in earnest.
Mary, I mean, just like I said, there were troubling, reports about what happened the Ayetoro end, where Senator Dino Melaye, the candidate of the PDP, were told was not able to vote. Can you confirm that at the end of the day, Senator Dino Melaye was not able to cast his vote, and why exactly? And of course, he made some call, about cancellation of elections in 5 areas of the local government. Shed more light on that.
All right. I personally interviewed Senator Dino Melaye at about between 2 and 3 p.m. today, and he expressed his concerns about the areas that had some kind of issue, especially where the area in Kogi State where we had the issue of the fake result sheets, and he was making calls for the cancellation of elections, of voting and elections there. However, in the case of the PDP's governorship candidate, Senator Dino Melaye, now, at the area where we already know that he votes, which is the Iluafon quarters at Ayetoro, we actually, at the time of our visiting, we did not find him voting there, right? But when we asked, we were told that he had already cast his votes, and but all of the time whilst we were there, I mean, journalists across both print and broadcast journalists, we were not able to get him voting at the time while we monitored the election.
And also, still staying on that, I do hear that EFCC, DSS security operatives were or stormed or visited, if you like, that particular area. Do we know why they were there?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it was nothing to worry about. I personally interviewed the director of DSS who was in charge of Kogi West, and he expressed to Arise TV News that they were just doing their usual monitoring. Now, the DSS was not the only anti-graft agent, there was not the only security agency, rather, that had actually visited. EFCC, the anti-graft agency, had actually also visited. They were just doing the needful, ensuring that there was no issue of vote buying and all of that. So it was not just that particular unit that the EFCC and the DSS had visited, and the DSS and the EFCC were not the only bodies that had actually visited. We also had heavy presence of security men of the Nigerian police force and the Nigerian army actually also visiting. So it wasn't any issue of concern like we find in some newspapers online.
All right, Mary Chinda, thank you so much. You're staying on this, definitely. Well, we'll take another short breather, and we will come back and wrap this up in a few minutes. All right, still have Epelle in Cairo, Egypt. He's the founder of TAF Africa. Handling the issues, looking into the issues of persons living with disabilities. Let me get your final take there. And I'm curious about a point Mary Chinda, correspondent there in Kogi State, made about, the 55-year-old man who escorted the elderly mother, maybe in the 80s or 90s, if I heard her clearly, to the election. Let's talk about very quickly about the prioritization of the elderly in this electoral process. Is it of concern to you? How should they be handled?
Yeah, absolutely. I was waiting to know how she voted. I was waiting to know whether priority was given to her. Obviously, that probably was the case. But yeah, it shows you also the enthusiasm, the interest of even the aged, the older persons in this process, which is a very good thing for democracy. Democracy cuts across board those who are eligible to vote, no matter their age. And I think with the kind of framework that we're working with, which gives priority to persons with disability and the older persons, pregnant body, the opportunity to participate in the process, creating a level playing field for everyone.
Absolutely, and that's a good place. Yeah. It's a good place. Unfortunately, it's a shame that the connection's a bit disrupted there. But thank you so much, Epelle, founder TAF Africa. Thank you indeed for joining us on this special coverage.